Welcome, everybody, to the M365 podcast, the podcast where we explore the technologies, strategies, and people shaping the modern Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft 365 often being like a small garage band. A few people collaborate, everyone knows what the other are doing, and very little format coordinating is required. But the organizations grows, more people join, new instruments are introduced, and everyone being playing in different rooms. Teams are created with owners. SharePoint sites accumulate outdated content. Guests retain access longer for the intern. Naming conventions become inconsistent. Applications overlap. Nobody knows which workplace is still active. And the governance of the introduction only after the environment has already become difficult to control. But does governance have to mean more restriction, approval process, and bureaucracy? Or it provides a structure that allows people to collaborate more freely, security, effectively. So, my guest today is Heiko Brenn, Director of Product Marketing at BCC, the business collaboration company, where he helps organizations bring governance, security, and automation to Microsoft 365. Heiko has more than 30 years of experience in IT. Through his career, he has worked as administrator, consult, product manager, technology evangelist. I think this give him a really rare perspective that combines technical deepness, business requirements, product strategy, and the real implementations. He is also frequently a conference speaker, podcast host, passionate drummer, and iPod music composer. He uses lessons from bands, jamming session, and orchestrates to explain why successful MC65 collaborations depends on finding the right balance between freedom and structure. Today, we will discuss governance maturity, ownership, lifecycle management, automation, PowerShell, security adoption, and how organizations can scale Microsoft 365 without turning collaboration into chaos. Heiko, welcome to the MC65 podcast.
Hey, Miko. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation here. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So, Heiko, before we talk about Microsoft 65 governance, could you little introduce yourself and tell us how your journey began into IT and why you choose Microsoft?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm in the industry for more than 30 years. So when I started, things like DOS 3.3 were a thing, which rarely people know nowadays. So I actually I started with IT more like it was more like uh, an accident, I would say. I made an apprenticeship at a bank, and they were looking for someone who was taking care of IT administration. And I said, "Well, hey, why not? I'm doing it." And this is where I started with PCs, printers. I was programming printer escape sequences for needle printers back in the day. So okay, that's dating myself. So that's a long time ago. And I first got in touch with Microsoft technology, actually with Exchange. So Exchange 5.5 was my first Microsoft product I was responsible for, and I loved it. So Exchange is really something that's kind of dear to my heart, I would say. And obviously, it evolved over time, and was also the first product, funny enough, who supported PowerShell
Mhm.
in with Exchange 2007. And as you mentioned, so I did administration. I did consulting. I did migrations from IBM infrastructures to Exchange. I became a product manager, product marketing manager, and yeah, um, so yeah, were responsible for many different aspects of IT, and mainly in the context of a software vendor. So
Mhm.
B2B software industry. That's why I'm in for like the last more than 20 years, and it's fun. It's ever changing, obviously, and it's something that really interests me every day because new things coming up. And yeah, so now today, as you mentioned, I'm with BCC, director of product marketing. Yeah, working with Microsoft 365, with governance, automation, and that's mainly my business part. And then on the hobby side of things, music is really what I'm passionate about, and this is how we came up with the idea of talking about this in this context, right?
Yeah, yeah. So um, the word governance, it's used, yeah, constantly, but different people mean very different things by it. What does Microsoft 365 governance mean by you?
So for me, governance is kind of the balance between creativity, freedom, and structure slash rules. So for many people, governance sounds like very strict. You have to do this and this and this and this is not allowed. And even though that might be part of it, I think the overall story of governance is get the people the possibility to be creative, to mm, do their work the best way possible, and keep the, let's say, the bureaucracy part um, in the background as much as possible, so that it's not becoming big governance is not getting in the way, but it really helps people to get their work done the best way possible.
Yeah. Um, I see a lot of people use yeah, use different words. And I think they have a little bit problem to separate what's the difference between governance, administration, security, and compliance. Can you a little bit yeah, tell us?
So from my perspective, governance also, I think, has to do, mm, in comparison with, for example, let's say, security. Governance really has also to do with the processes, with what people in finance, in HR, what kind of how they work, and what kind of guidelines they need to get their work done best way possible, also to fulfill obviously legal requirements. And that's I think another important aspect of the whole governance process or implementations, because there is obviously not a one size fits all. So rules have to apply according to the different parts of the organization. So with HR, legal, obviously the rules have to be much more strict than maybe in sales or marketing. And so this is for me, this is the let's say the governance part of things. Security is something that I see as, let's say, the underlying foundation, in the sense of, you need to have MFA, you have all the security measurements and applications in place, and governance for me sits on top of that, and is concentrating on, let's say, the people business, and make it as easy as possible for the people to do their work, but still in the framework of that's yeah, according to the rules, and so based on the company guidelines.
Mm. So will you say there are, I say, universal governance principles, or must every organization create its own model?
That's a good question. I think there are some principle underlining, um, let's say, building blocks that I would say belong to governance in general. The way that they are implemented in detail, that might be different for every organization. That's what we see with our projects as well. But if you look at things like lifecycle automation, things like ownership, things like reporting, templates, policies, things like that, I think this is something that belongs to governance in general. The interesting question is then how to really, yeah, fill that with life. Like as I mentioned before, like okay, what's the right policy for teams or for guest access for legal and HR compared to sales or development or marketing? That there is, I think it's important to really make sure and make it clear that there is, in my perspective and what we see, is there is no one size fits all. So this is really where it becomes interesting to also understand the business of each and every organization to then define the right rules, the right policies, and then implement it accordingly.
Mm. And that's another topic I think a lot of companies discuss. Is it's who should be responsible for governance? Is it the IT team, the security team? Is it the compliance team, legal? Is it the leadership, or it's a cross-functional group? Who should be, from your perspective, responsible?
So from my perspective, I would say governance in general is a team sport. So it's really about involving all the different. I would say even everything that you mentioned kind of is part of the process. So meaning if you have people in IT who are very passionate about it and they want to implement, and they have a good reason to implement governance, but they don't have a sponsor on the C level saying, okay, this is an important thing, we need to do that, then yeah, it's not going to work. So I think mm, different roles have to be involved, and they play their role. So for me, it ideally it starts at the top where that there's obviously someone responsible and has the role to say we need on a corporate level we need governance. We are responsible to meet internal and external requirements, rules, policies, laws, um, maybe ISO and EU regulations, other things like that, so that on the board level, on the leadership level, there is someone responsible. And then, of course, it breaks down to the IT, to the head of IT, to yeah, the CISOs, the security people, obviously, that need to be also involved and having, especially when it comes to reporting, a very important role. So, and then and that's the thing, is another aspect that sometimes also is not really in the focus, like the people in the line of business. Um, I think that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, and let's say ideally the governance does its job somewhere in the background, so people don't really see it. They don't really realize it. But of course, then they need to be aware of it. And yes, there are obviously technologies, and we at BCC we provide technology, a tool to do that. But you have to have the people in place as well. So making these people aware of why this is important is something that is also really something that we try also to get across, that it's not just, I'm throwing a tool over the fence and say, okay, governance solved. So that's not how it works, right? So from the top down to the bottom, so to speak, there needs to be, there are different owners for different parts of governance, and the line of business people, they need to be in the game as well, because we need to make sure that, coming back to previously, we said, okay, it's a combination between freedom, creativity, and structure. So we need to make sure that we implement just the right structure, so that still people can do their business the best way possible.
Mm. And yeah, that's awesome. So that's a little bit dive into today's topic. We will take a little bit about music, making music, and Microsoft 365. Where did you see an analogy here?
I think there are a couple of metaphors between music and governance. So in music, and you mentioned at the beginning, I'm creating like tunes on with GarageBand on my iPad, for example. It starts with a creative process. You're creating, I don't know, creating a drum beat or a chord progression or a melody, or I'm finding a title that inspires to do something. And that's great, but so that's the creative part, and you create this different. But then, of course, the song has to have a structure. It starts somewhere. It has an intro. It has a verse, maybe a pre-chorus and a chorus and an outro and whatever. Um, because without that, people will get lost. They hear something, and if there is no structure, they cannot follow um, the song because it sounds confusing. And well, maybe for some people that might be okay, maybe like free jazz, which is very
Yeah.
special. But still, there's I'm not a jazz expert here, but there is a structure because the people play together, and that's the other thing. So the first thing is you have this combination of you create something, and then you put it into a structure. And if you do it alone, like when I'm doing with GarageBand, that's okay. I'm in control of everything. But if I'm playing with a band, um, then of course I have to make sure that the drummer and the keyboard player, the singer, the guitarist, the bass player, they play in the same tuning. They play with the same tempo, so that it all makes sense. And this is like in Microsoft 365 as well, right? So if everybody is creating its own teams, and they're inviting guests like crazy, and nobody is taking care of if they're still needed, or everybody creates SharePoints just as they want to because there's no policy in place. It creates chaos, and that's like again like making music without a structure, or playing in a band where every musician might be super professional and super technically in their music, but if they don't play together and if they don't listen to each other, then you get noise, right? You don't get music. And for me, this is something that is there is really some analogy to between Microsoft 65 governance and music. And there are more, right? You could think of well, okay, I'm starting with one single musician, then maybe you have a band, and think about having an orchestra with, I don't know, 70 musicians and a choir with 100 people. And obviously, you need a conductor. You need someone who is taking care of the sound and the dynamics, and again also the rhythm and the tempo and things like that. Because the bigger this musical entity gets, like with an orchestra, it's really huge, right? It can be really huge. Then without a conductor, it's bound to end up in total chaos. And so again, this is, I think, another great analogy, because if you have let's say you start or in a small company, yeah, you might have to have maybe a band leader, so to speak, who is where you're defining your rules and taking care of that they are really uh, in place. And the bigger the company organization gets, the more important it gets to really to have a conductor who say, okay, these are our rules, and within these rules, people can work, can do their job, but there
Mm.
are rules that people have to follow, because otherwise, again, we are creating noise instead of something that really makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's often also called orchestration governance. So it's the orchestra. It's a little bit in there, but I think a little bit about SMEs. So is this more? There are more a garage band, or have they also, or the conductor, the defined roles, the or all the I don't know, or can they, yeah, start small and become bigger?
Well, I think that that's a good question. I think well, the size of the organization, I think, is one part. The other part of course, is it a small company that is in a making business in a highly regulated industry? Then no matter how small or big you are, you have to follow um, certain rules. So, but from what I would say, from my experience, that is that obviously with smaller companies, your policies might start at a, yeah, let's say like a think big, start small. You're implementing your first policies, your first governance rules, and as the company grows, then of course, yeah, it's the governance policy is growing as well. So I would say that
Mm.
because there's also often a question like, okay, what um, when should I start uh, organizing, planning, designing my governance rules, and then start implementing it? And I would say, um, don't wait too long. Yeah, start as soon as possible, because especially in a small company, when it starts to grow, then it becomes even more difficult to start to implement it. So I would definitely start at an early stage, um, with some maybe more simplified rules, but have something in place already. And again, if it's a regulated industry, then of course it's it might it's mandatory, right? So it's not something that it's a nice to have, but it's a must have for sure.
Mm. Awesome. I think a little bit when you have a jam session, what does a jam session teach us about creativity and self-service, and how can we take this learning to governance?
Um, well, so a jam session is a good example where a group of people start to play together, maybe the first time, right? So there's a drummer, and then maybe a guitarist, a bass player joins in, maybe a singer. So it might be spontaneous. Everybody joins in. Everybody is motivated, brings its idea. Um, Everybody starts playing, and then again, this is something that at one point, okay, you need to have some kind of structure. So let's say the typical jam session starts. What I experience is like, let's play a blues in, I don't know, in D major, because then you have a 12 bar structure everybody knows. So even without knowing the people who are playing the instruments, if you're saying, okay, let's play a blues in D minor, everybody knows what to do when the chord change appears and things like that. So that's when you start grooving, so to speak. So the musicians play together, they groove together, then maybe someone is uh, is making a cue saying, okay, now maybe we're changing keys or something. So even then, you need to have someone who is like a conductor saying, okay, we are an orchestrator saying, okay, now, okay, but well, we're coming to an end, or maybe we're changing the tempo a little bit. So this is, I would say, like the same when you think about the adoption um, of Microsoft 365, and including obviously governance. It's like you're starting with implementing a couple of teams. People start using it. The adoption is excellent. People like it. Then you get into the next phase where there are more teams, there are more sites, there are more groups. and still maybe nobody really knows what everybody is doing, but it's still working somehow. But at some point, you need to say, okay, now we need to have again we need to have some rules. And for the jam session, when you start it, it's typically like the example. Let's play a blues in F major or whatever. Everybody knows what to do. But if you're growing and maybe if new musicians come in, then yeah, rules start to make sense. And I would say it's like the same with Microsoft 365.
Mm, yeah, awesome. I think a little bit, yeah, uh, a successful band needs the structure, but it also needs room for, I say, interpretation. How can Microsoft 365 governance preserve that freedom?
So this is of course again a question about how what kind of rules y- you actually need from your internal your internal view, or from the external regulations. I mean, with the built-in functionality from Microsoft 365, of course, making sure that maybe not everybody can create teams as they like, or that you have predefined templates for different areas in your organization is something that really starts to help to get a structure. Because what we see oftentimes is that, especially in teams, it's well, yeah, like a few years ago, the organizations just they opened the floodgates, so to speak, right? So everybody was creating teams as they like, with, I don't know, all kinds of no naming conventions typically. So it's very difficult to find um, information and make sure, and finding out, okay, which teams belong to which part of the organization. So these are things as a starting point that really helps to get some kind of structure with naming conventions, for example. Also, and that's true for teams. It's also true for guests, and also to make it very obvious that what kind of guests again belong to which kind of project, for example. So because guests are typically something that are temporarily used, not all the time, but often it's project based, so that so people and IT have a chance to identify, for example, guests who are not um, necessary anymore because the project ended already, like 3 6 months ago. Um, so these are things that I think are an easy entry into governance policies. And then, of course, the other thing is then really kind of enforcing it and making sure it's adopted. That's then the next important and yeah, interesting question, how to enforce this actually.
Mm, awesome. Um, Uh, that's one thing that we have talked about the conductor, and we do on the MC65 show. We use every show has a song, and we use Zuno for this. Did you think the AI can become the conductor in a government environment?
Ha, that's another interesting question. Even you mentioning just Suno is something that's very interesting, but maybe in another context. So I think AI can help and is already helping to, maybe not so much defining governance, but um, making sure that the structure that has been defined is is really in place, and it's enforced, and identifying anomalies, identifying where maybe things are drifting, um, because maybe someone is for whatever reason finds a way to maybe get around naming conventions and say, okay, I have another idea how I want to name my teams, and then um, to automate that so that let's say you have an, so to speak, AI infused governance, or yeah, or conductor, as you mentioned. So I think that's definitely something that that helps. The analogy to Suno, I think, is a little bit difficult because here you have, well, not a lot of control about what's actually happening in the background. Um, that's why, but AI definitely is something that and well, if you think about agents, then of course you have AI in the center of governance anyway. So, but for the controlling part, I would say, yeah, having AI to be the conductor, or to be the let's say, to be the role um, that is, so to speak, sitting at the mission control and identifying where anomalies are taking place. For me, makes absolute sense. Yes.
Mm. Did you think Microsoft 365 service requirement different musical arrangements? For example, should Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive have their own governance rhythm?
Well, I would say it depends again on let if we keep in this picture, the part of the depends on the section of the orchestra, so to speak. So let's say there is, maybe there needs to be a different rule for the string section, and another policy for the horn section, for example, and another one for all the percussions, because they have different roles, because they have different responsibilities, which kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier. Like, yes, it makes sense to have different rules for HR and legal, because it needs to be much more strict. For example, if you invite a guest, um, the guest needs to sign electronically an NDA. That might not be necessary at all for a marketing project with an agency, or with a prospect in the sales area. Um, so I think having this opportunity and having this flexibility, especially for bigger companies, is, I think, really key for a successful governance implementation.
Mm, mm. Okay, interesting. What would be the N365 equivalent of a sound check before a concert?
Okay, that's a good question. So the interesting thing is, before the sound check, and that's something I think is also part of the whole story here. So be able to really to make a sound check, the stage needs to be ready, the light needs to be ready, everything. So that kind of um, is the job of the roadies. So if you're attending a concert, you're standing in sort of the stage, and the show is going on. It's like, wow, it sounds great, it looks great. So they obviously they made a sound check and everything, but before that, all the roadies took care of the stage setup, the cabling, the instruments, the technical equipment, the lighting, light, and so on. And then, so that's really, and nobody sees them, right? So if you are attending a concert, you see the musicians on stage. Maybe sometimes you see the roadies just in the background doing something, because maybe, I don't know, a drum fell off the stage and they have to bring it back and whatever. So the roadies are very very important part here. And then you have the sound check, and the sound check for me would be as when you talk about the equivalent to Microsoft 365, I would say this is where you do your test runs when you start implementing your governance policies, and you say, okay, there is a test group we have from ideally from every part of the organization. We have people in the project team, and we are starting to roll out the policies, and we are starting to testing them for a period of time, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, sometimes maybe a couple of months, depending on again the size of the organization. So that's for me, that would be the sound check phase, so to speak. And during that time, of course, again, coming back to the roadies, you might say, okay, and we need to adjust something. The I don't know, the lights are not configured correctly, or maybe the monitor boxes or the in-ear sound is not correct. So you start to adjusting things so that when you go live, so to speak, when the show begins, everything hopefully is perfect.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, it's cool. And let's talk about one of your, I think, topic you are famous for, and this is governance maturity. So, what does an in major Microsoft 365 environment looks like? Is it, yeah, I don't know. And yeah, can you a little bit explain here? How did you see it?
Yeah, you mean the different maturity levels that
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I mean there are different, well, there are different maturity model or frameworks um, for that to identify where do I stand as an organization? Am I at the very beginning, or is everything already in place and I only need to measure, monitor, and maybe adjust the policies that are in place? So the initial phase is really where we see, let's say that oftentimes happens when we go to customers, and they say, okay, yes, we have a problem with team sprawl, with guest user sprawl. We have no consistent ownerships in our for the objects in Microsoft 365, like SharePoint sites and so on. So this is where we see, this is like the initial phase. There might be some ad hoc processes, but typically there is a high high or high percentage of sprawl, and an unorganized way of using Microsoft 365. And then what we do, and that again doesn't have to do with the tool. It's really about the process and the concept, where we say, okay, we need to help you to implement your first basic policies that needs to be in place before we take the next step. So things starts to get in a more managed way. So we start with naming conventions, when we're making sure that every guest, every team has an owner. Um, we might already define things like, okay, are this can we implement something where we can make sure that a team that is based on a project already has a uh, best before end date, so to speak. So that's it's going to be um, archived after 6 months automatically. So step by step, getting rid of inconsistent ways of doing things. And then if we move forward, then the next level, where we start to standardize as much as possible, where we also so that might be, again, for example, lifecycle management, where we have different policies in place, different templates for different parts of the organizations, and start also to monitor the activities, so that we are able to, or the customer is able to identify there is something there's something going on. Like, for example, well, normally there are, let's say, 50 new teams being created each week, and all of a sudden it becomes 500. So this is where, okay, we have a threshold reached where somebody should take a look at that, why that actually happens, and then step by step implementing all these rules and policies on the organizational wide level,
Mhm.
and starting, yeah, to obviously to measure it and to monitor it, and then at this stage, then it's about, if that's in place, then you are at the level where you can say, okay, now, okay, we are optimizing, we are tweaking policies. That might also be then the phase where, again, depending on your organization, you might have new companies becoming part of the existing organization. So we have to implement that existing policies for new parts of the organization, so that we can really have a dynamic way of adjusting these different policies as is necessary. So coming from avoiding, stopping the sprawl in general, make it more consistent, more controllable, measurable monitoring, and then being able to change it as necessary.
Mm, mm. I think, um, when you're the conductor, and it's a hard job. You must really good listen to all the instruments, and you must uh, hear, oh, here's something wrong. And a lot of people, I think the most people don't hear it. They're sitting in the concert, but they don't hear it when something it's a little bit wrong. So what what have we to listen on governance? What are the I think warning signs here? It's something yeah uh yeah starts to get wrong.
Yeah, out of tune, maybe. So yeah, so it's a good question. It's about, when do you start hearing the wrong notes? Because, as you said, maybe at the beginning nobody realizes it, because maybe it's just one musician out of 80. But then if it becomes almost, all of a sudden there are like five who are starting to follow the wrong notes, then there's obviously something wrong, and you need to take action. Um, so this is what we see. Again, take the example of this, for example, naming conventions, where it's important to identify um, the drift. Yeah, it's almost uh, like a desired state configuration, where you say, okay, this is our rules, and we need to find out if somebody is not following the rules or trying to get around it, and having this alert mechanisms, or maybe even having the possibility to, let's say, self-healing, so to speak. So where, as with DSC, where if when it's detected, the drift, it's automatically goes back to how it has to be best, based on the on the governance policies. So, and to identify it, and to, let's say it, again, there are different ways. So naming conventions might be one, or, as I mentioned earlier, like, all of a sudden, okay, there are much more guests being created by, or teams, maybe even by a specific user. So this is where really the monitoring part becomes important, to identify that, um, and to get an alert on that, before it gets from just, one wrong uh, tone to 50 or 100 wrong notes that are being played. So having this kind of an early detection possibility really is important here. Um, and the reason, or the let's say, the the source of this when something starts to drift can be yeah, different things. It could be a quantity of objects that have been created, naming wrong naming conventions. Also, if you're measuring, let's say, the size of your um, let's say SharePoint sites, where all of a sudden you have a lot of data being stored or being deleted. Um, Maybe even more interesting. This is also in the context of user offboardings. Sometimes a topic where um, where we see like, okay, this is the most, maybe even more, one of the critical, most critical phases let's say, of a user life cycle. So what happens in the last 4 or 5 days of an employee being with an organization? So taking care of that is another important part here as well, I would say.
Mm. Let's talk about another, I say, yeah, a little bit buzzword, the Microsoft 365 governance sprawl. What is exactly sprawl in governance, and how will you explain it as a musician?
So I would say well, the first thing that comes to mind, and I think this is where it started, is like the team sprawl, right? Where you have no policies in the sense of who is allowed to create teams. Again, what's the naming convention? What's the lifecycle management? What templates to be used? How to monitor everything? I would say that that's still, for many organizations, a real pain point. The same is true with guests. I would say, if I have to make um, let's say, a top five list, so to speak, of the what's in the charts on top of what's on top of the scroll chart, so to speak. I would say Teams is very high up there. Then you have guests for sure. Um, then you have um, also your SharePoint sites. Um, and then step by step you have um, the other M365 objects, but the top two are definitely teams and guests. And the interesting thing is, oftentimes you might think, oh, okay, this is something. It's a buzzword, and it should be solved um, for a long time. But the interesting thing is that still a lot of organizations struggle with it.
Mm.
Um, then they and even and that's the interesting part. The first week I started with BCC, we went to a trade show, and I had some conversations at our booth. And there was one huge organization, which will remain nameless, obviously. They decided um, not to implement any policies for teams.
Okay.
Uh, um, and the re well the and that's where it gets kind of, well, I don't know, but it's not what I would do. But they say, well, it's like the answer was like, yeah, we don't really care. And there's a how can you not care? Because this might be very risky if you don't know what's happening inside your organization. And then he said, yeah, but okay, we're not sharing any information with external. They were assured of that. But that's, I would say, really something that I've never heard before and after that conversation, because that was really like, okay, um, good luck. Because um, yeah, so from my perspective, these are still the main topics. And still for me and for us in the organization, uh, the starting point for many conversations that we have about governance, because this is where, also, you could say, if you do it right, it's like a low hanging fruit, because if you start solving that, and that also, and that's maybe something we haven't really touched on, but what I see here as an important topic is also that once you have these policies in place, and you stop sprawl, you can also start um, delegating these tasks in a secure way to the line of business people. So it's not an IT. It's not. So let's say you have the conductor in the background, and the policies are in place. Everybody knows how to play their instruments, and now you can even uh, take someone who is maybe not in the limelight, so to speak, of the orchestra, to do things because the guidelines are clear. And so as a conductor, you don't have to care. You are able to care less about this things, because yeah, it's organized. We set our guardrails, and then um, it just runs by the people who know how to play their instrument, which would be in this case the people in the line of business.
Mm. And in your company, when the BCC, what role does this play on a concert?
You mean we as with our solution? Yeah. So I would say this is, in general, I would say the conductor, for sure, um, to organize that, but also because I mentioned this role of the roadies, which are often uh, well, you never see them, but without them, nothing would work. So I would say this is something. This is for the work in the background, so to speak. So defining the policies, so the provisioning is automated, the reviews are automated, making sure that teams are being archived and deleted after the right period of time, that then there are reviews uh, scheduled automatically. So this is something where the roadie starts to build it, and then you have the conductor once it's built that says, okay, now we are ready, and now we are going live, and we are orchestrating it, and we are making sure that every instrument plays the right tune, with the right tempo and the right dynamics. So that's, I would say, is the role of BCC and Affirmatic in this case, which is the name of the solution.
Mm, awesome. Oh, we're a little bit run out of time. So I have in every session a rapid fire round. So
Okay.
uh, and I give a short question and you give a short answer. So Teams or Outlook?
I have to say Outlook, because I'm an Exchange guy, right?
PowerShell or Microsoft Graph?
PowerShell.
Governance or adoption? Which comes first?
Governance.
Self-service or approval?
It belongs together. So first self-service, but you need to have approval.
Okay. And policies or principles?
Well, policies are the product of principles. So again, principles first, and then policies.
Okay. Drum or guitar?
Drums.
um, yeah. The governance control organizations implement too late. What did you think?
Oftentimes, I would say this is one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to governance. They're just waiting too long, saying, "Oh, well, yeah, we'll do it later." Yeah, because I mean, you have the management up your neck saying, "Okay, we need to roll out Teams, we need to roll out OneDrive and Viva Engage and whatever," and then everybody who's saying, but wait a second, we should think about governance. It's like, okay, this is the this is the person who's stepping on the brake for the project. But in my perspective, I would say this makes perfect sense to really not just think about governance before you do that, but really start to implement at least the basic policies before you start and roll out. Because and we see this in many conversations that yes, this as we had talked about before, the sprawl things in teams and guests and whatnot it's real, and it's because of that, right? Because we need to roll out, yeah, just start, press the button, and then the damage is done.
Yeah, yeah. Good governance in one sentence.
It's the perfect balance between freedom, creativity, and structure.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, then my last question is, if people taking one thing from this conversation, what should it be?
Um, I would say if we go back to the music scene, I would say the most successful bands necessary are not the ones who with the best individual musicians. It's the one that where they really play together to be successful. And I think this is like the purpose of governance. Um, so to coming back to music, playing a great song with all the musicians, make it sound great, be successful, and I think that should be the role of governance.
Mm, awesome. Yeah. Then my last question is, who should I invite next, and what secret question should I ask him?
Ah, phew. Uh, well, I mean, I'm just thinking. Did you already interview Raphael Kölner?
No, no.
Okay, you should do that. um, a secret question. I don't know. Hmm.
What question makes him nervous? Let's change it to this.
I I don't know. I don't know. Maybe what's his favorite band? I don't know. How well is his sleep? Because they got a little son beginning of the year, so he can tell a little stories about that. I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah. Then I can say, Heiko, thank you for joining me on the M365 Powerhouse and showing us that Microsoft 365 governance does not have to be bureaucracy system designed to stop people from working. The best governance operation, much like the structure behind great music, it creates a shared rhythm, establishes a clear responsibility, and gives people enough freedom to contribute without allowing the entry performance to descend in chaos. My biggest takeaway from this conversation is that Microsoft 365 Sprawl is rarely caused by collaboration itself. It's caused by missing ownership, unclear life cycle process, and disconnected controls and manual administrative patience. So that uh, yeah, can no longer keep longer pace with the organization. So governance must therefore become an operational capability. Workplace need clear purpose and accountable owners. XML access must be reviewed. Inactive content requires a life cycle. And thank you for staying here. And for all the users, all the links from Heiko you found on the M365 FM podcast website in this episode. And thank you for staying here with me.
Thank you, Miku. Was fun.